There's a saying in the Grand Canyon, down is optional, up is mandatory. Hiking below the rim is not like normal hiking. The trail lures you in with the easiest part first and then demands everything from you on the way back out. And every single year, people underestimate that. They stand at the rim looking down into the canyon and think, oh wow, the river doesn't even look that far. Adorable. The Grand Canyon has absolutely mastered the art of lying to people about distance and scale. The dangerous part is that the canyon makes you feel confident first. The beginning of your descent feels amazing. Gravity is helping you, your legs feel fresh, the views are unbelievable, and everyone's stopping for pictures every 30 seconds because every corner somehow looks even more ridiculous than the last. Then several hours later, the canyon taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, bestie, remember every step you happily skipped down earlier? Yeah, we're doing that in reverse now. Today, we're talking all about hiking into the Grand Canyon, the major trails, what's actually at the bottom, how difficult it really is, the biggest mistakes people make, safety, and why this is one of the most rewarding adventures in the national park system if you respect it properly. Now, despite everything we're going to discuss today, I still think hiking below the rim is one of the coolest experiences you can have in the United States. You just get to prepare for it like it's a real physical challenge and not a cute little casual afternoon stroll fueled by vibes and half a granola bar. In case you missed it, the Grand Canyon has two rims, the North Rim and the more heavily visited South Rim. When most people talk about hiking below the Grand Canyon Rim, they're usually talking about South Rim because that's where the two most famous corridor trails are, South Kaibab and Bright Angel. The South Rim is open year-round. It's easier to access and where most visitors spend their time. The North Rim is completely different. It sits over 8,000 feet in elevation, gets significantly more snow, has a much shorter season, and it feels quieter and more remote overall. And because it's at higher elevation, temperatures there can actually be dramatically cooler than at the bottom of the canyon. Like you can literally have cold morning temperatures at the rim and dangerously hot temperatures at the river on the exact same day. That temperature difference surprises people constantly. Depending on the season, the bottom of the canyon can easily be 15 to 25 degrees hotter than the rim. In summer, temperatures at Phantom Ranch near the river regularly exceed 100 degrees. Meanwhile, winter hiking can bring snow and ice to the upper portions of trails while the bottom stays relatively mild. The canyon basically looked at normal weather patterns and said, what if we made this more chaotic? The deeper you hike, the more you feel those environmental changes. Different temperatures, different plants, different rock colors, different smells even. It feels like several national parks stacked vertically on top of each other. Now, if you're hiking below the rim for the first time, you're probably choosing between South Kaibab Trail and Bright Angel Trail. Keep in mind, these trails are very different experiences. South Kaibab is the trail I personally hiked partially, and it's probably the most visually dramatic trail in the canyon. This is where you'll find Ooh Ah Point, which is one of the most accurate names ever created because that really is your reaction. You get down there and immediately start sounding like a malfunctioning emotional support owl. South Kaibab Trail is steeper, more exposed, and has nonstop panoramic views almost the entire time. Yet it also has no water available on the trail. None, zero. The canyon basically says, here are some of the best views on Earth. Figure out your hydration situation before starting, or may the odds be ever in your favor. The South Kaibab Trailhead starts around 7,200 feet in elevation, and if you continue all the way down to the Colorado River, it's roughly 7 miles each way with nearly 5,000 feet of elevation change. To put that into perspective, you're climbing back out of the canyon roughly comparable to an entire mile's worth of vertical distance, after already exhausting yourself descending into a giant desert oven first. And this is where people start underestimating things. Because technically, yes, hiking all the way from the rim to the river and back up in one day is possible. Yet, possible and good idea for the average person are two very different conversations. A lot of visitors hear the phrase day hike and they picture something like a moderate waterfall trail where you stop halfway for trail mix and a selfie. Meanwhile, the Grand Canyon is sitting there like, excellent, another tribute. Very, very few people are actually prepared to hike to the river and back in a single day safely, especially in warmer months. And that's okay. You do not need to do that to have an incredible experience here. Some of the best hikes for beginners are much shorter. Ah Point is about 1.8 miles round trip on the South Kaibab Trail, and it gives you amazing below the rim views. Just past that is Cedar Ridge, around 3 miles round trip, and it's another popular turnaround point. Over on Bright Angel Trail, many people hike to the 1.5-mile rest house or the 3-mile rest house before turning around. And these are great hikes. I really would like to emphasize that because social media has convinced people that every outdoor experience needs to end with somebody collapsing dramatically at the finish line while inspirational music plays in the background. No, you can hike a few miles into the canyon, experience the scale and the beauty of it, and still have an incredible day. And one of the smartest things you can do is decide your turnaround point before you start hiking. Because the closer you get to the river at the base of the canyon, the harder it becomes to turn around. After descending for hours, your brain starts negotiating with you. You start thinking things like, well, we're already this far, or the river is right there, even though right there might still mean another hour plus of hiking one way. And psychologically, turning around downhill feels wrong. Your body isn't suffering yet, so your brain keeps pushing the goalpost farther away. Meanwhile, the experienced hikers are already thinking ahead to that climb back out because that is the real event. The descent is the setup. The climb out is the challenge. When I hiked South Kaibab at the very end of June, I started at 8:30 a.m. and it was already pretty warm. And what really stood out to me wasn't even just the scenery, it was watching people climbing back out. You could hear them before you saw them sometimes. Heavy breathing echoing up the switchbacks, people stopping constantly for water, hikers squeezing themselves into tiny patches of shade like Victorian women avoiding sun exposure, sweat pouring down their faces, or that very specific exhausted stare people get when they realize the canyon has won the battle. Seeing those hikers climbing uphill completely changed my perspective while I was still descending, because going down does feel easy at first. Yet I remember looking up at those switchbacks thinking, oh, that's right, we get to go back up that. And if you have knee problems like I do, the downhill itself can already start beating you up before the uphill even begins. I have very little cartilage in my knees, and the steep descent started aggravating them surprisingly quickly. People think the hard part is always cardiovascular, yet sometimes it's your joints filing a formal complaint against your life choices. Now, another thing people underestimate is how long everything takes. The canyon slows people down constantly because you're stopping for views every like 5 seconds. The heat drains your energy, elevation can start to affect your breathing, and uphill hiking becomes dramatically slower later in the day. Even relatively short below the rim hikes can take several hours once you factor in breaks, photos, rest stops, water, and pacing. People sometimes ask if kids can hike below the rim too. The answer is sometimes. It depends on their age, fitness, the conditions, distance, heat, and preparation. Fair warning, this is definitely not one of those national park hikes where you can casually drag a cranky 6-year-old downhill at noon in July while carrying one tiny Disney water bottle for the entire family. Please do not make the rangers write that report. Now, eventually, if you continue deep enough into the canyon, you reach the Colorado River and the area around Phantom Ranch. And this is the part a lot of people don't fully realize exists. There are actual campgrounds down there, bridges crossing the river, bathrooms, ranger stations, mule operations, canteens, access to Bright Angel Creek, trees, and little shaded areas that suddenly feel like luxury resorts after hours of exposed hiking. Reaching the river feels surreal because after descending through all these layers of rock and heat, suddenly you're standing next to this massive muddy river flowing through the center of one of the biggest geological features on Earth. And crossing Black Bridge or Silver Bridge is one of those bucket list experiences people remember forever. And this is also where the canyon starts really testing people psychologically. Because once hikers finally reach the river, many are already exhausted, overheated, dehydrated, or mentally drained. And then they remember they still get to climb back out. That's where rescues often begin. Every year, the park responds to hundreds of search and rescue incidents: heat exhaustion, dehydration, electrolyte imbalance, injuries, poor planning, hiking too late in the day. These are all incredibly common. And one thing that repeatedly comes up in rescue stories is people ignoring warning signs because they become hyper focused on reaching a goal. Rangers constantly talk about hikers pushing beyond their limits because they're emotionally committed to reaching the river, Phantom Ranch, or a specific checkpoint. That's why turnaround discipline matters so much. One rescue story that stuck with me involved hikers continuing deeper into the canyon during dangerous heat conditions after already showing signs of physical distress. You see versions of this all the time. Somebody starts feeling weak, dizzy, nauseous, exhausted, and yet instead of turning around, they think, we just need to make it a little farther. The canyon is incredibly beautiful, yet it is also extremely unforgiving of bad decision making. And timing matters a lot. Experienced hikers often start before sunrise, especially during warmer months. Not because they're trying to become wilderness influencers, because hiking uphill in direct afternoon summer sun inside the Grand Canyon is basically nature's version of a hostage negotiation. You do not want to be climbing out at 2 p.m. in July if you can avoid it. So let's talk practical preparation for a minute, because this episode is not meant to scare people away from hiking below the rim. It's meant to help you actually enjoy it safely. First tip, carry way more water than you think you need, especially on South Kaibab where there's no water available. And also carry electrolytes because people absolutely can get into trouble drinking only water while sweating heavily for hours. Number two, start early, earlier than what feels emotionally necessary. The canyon rewards morning people and punishes procrastinators. Plus, if you're visiting from the East Coast like me, your body may still be on Eastern time and used to waking up during what feels really early in Arizona. Third tip, choose realistic goals and do it before you begin the descent. There is no shame in turning around while you still feel strong. Honestly, that's usually the smartest move. Number four, trekking poles genuinely help, especially on descents and especially if your knees are questionable chaos goblins like mine. Fifth, know where water and bathrooms actually are before you start hiking. Bright Angel usually has seasonal water stations at places like the 1.5 mile and 3 mile rest houses and Havasupai Gardens. Yet water availability can change, so always check current park updates before your hike. And finally, respect the canyon enough to be honest with yourself about your fitness level. The Grand Canyon does not care about ego. It does not care that you once did a stair climber for 20 minutes while watching Netflix in the AC. Now, despite all of this, hiking below the rim really is incredible. There's something unforgettable about descending into geological layers that are hundreds of millions of years old, while the canyon walls tower around you, changing colors throughout the day. The deeper you go, the quieter everything becomes. You stop looking at the canyon and you start feeling completely surrounded by it. And I think hiking below the rim, even just a short distance, helps people understand the Grand Canyon in a completely different way. So if hiking into the canyon is on your bucket list, do it. Absolutely do it, yet respect it. Prepare, start early, carry more water, pick realistic turnaround points, and remember that the canyon will still be there tomorrow. You do not need to conquer the Grand Canyon to have an incredible experience there. Sometimes the smartest hikers are the ones who turn around while they still feel strong. That's probably the most Grand Canyon lesson of all. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe because we still have more Grand Canyon content coming, including an entire future episode dedicated to rim hiking, which is a completely different level of adventure, logistics, and preparation. And if you've hiked below the rim before, let us know in the comments how far you went and what surprised you most about the experience. I'll see you next time on The Great Escape.